warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the participants and the members of our audience. This is our seventh issue of Architecture, Design and Talk. We simply stylized it as ED+. This is where we will be listening to talks about architecture, design, and everything that goes in between. So this talk is brought to you live by the Department of Architecture, Faculty of Built Environment, UNIMAS. With us today in this issue is Architect Wee Min. He will share a talk on the incomplete tenets of architecture in the tropics. Architect Min was born and raised in Kuching until Form 6 in St. Thomas School. In 1982, he left for further studies in Australia, where he spent 8 years studying and working. It was those final years of working when he experienced the importance of collaborative practice, where people work in teams toward a common goal through the sharing of ideas and work. He hopes to cultivate this in his work and teaching. He was a founding director of Design Network Architects, where he left in 2015 to set up Minwee Architect. Now, before we hand this over to Architect Min, I would like to remind the members of the audience to adhere to this one basic housekeeping rule, which is to make sure you turn off your microphone at all time unless some interactions are required during the talk itself. And the members of the audience are highly encouraged to ask questions to the speaker after the talk, or alternatively, you can use the chat box to deliver your question. So I, as the moderator, will try my best to attend to your questions. With that being said, sit back, relax, and enjoy the talk. Over to you, Architect Min.
All right, good morning, guys. I've been told that I'm speaking to Year 1, Year 2, and Year 3 students. So I thought I'll use examples of projects to just talk a little bit about one of those common questions that students are always asked when they are confronted by lecturers or tutors in a crit. They always ask a question like, what is it? What is your concept, I feel that is usually a very difficult question to answer for students because it's usually not one single idea that will drive your design, unless you're designing a building that is very, very iconic, such as maybe the bird's nest in Beijing. But most of our other buildings that we encounter, that we design in the course of the architecture degree, usually is made up of very, very many other ideas that we may have. So I like to use this as an example to basically divide a project, a typical project, into its various stages: conceptual stage, schematic design stage, design development, contract documentation, and contract admin. Now, most of you might not know all the various stages, but the school that you are in now, they structure your modules so that you cover all this as part of your syllabus. You may or may not be aware that they all contribute towards the completion of a project. Usually when you do studio, you're doing conceptual design, you're doing schematic design. You probably do a bit of design development and maybe some working drawings, which is contract documentation. But you've got other subjects that basically guide you along the way. You've got building technology, which is focused in developing you in design development and contract documentation. You've also got professional practice, which basically guides you when it comes to contract administration and the project completion. So the reason why I picked this picture is not just to be funny. It's because in the course of a project, it's a bit like juggling. It's a bit like this lady trying to keep all the hoops up in the air, to be constantly moving, because they're always in balance. Things don't always. They're not driven by the same ideas during the various stages of the project. Different things come into play at various stages. So maybe if I were to add another line of information along the way, such as things like appropriate technology, building assembly, building program, conceptual imaging, all these things, they are essentially not the main driving concept, but these are all design principles or design preoccupations that most of us do have. Most of you, whether you are aware or not of it, even in year one, there will be certain things that you like, that you are more fond of. You're more fond of things that are natural. You're more fond of things that are old. You're more fond of things that are using high technology. You're more interested in things that are dealing with people. So these are design preoccupations that it drives you, as a designer. So I encourage you to think along those lines when you're doing your design. Let your personal interests, things that drive you, basically, it will shape your design. So the design then represents you as a person. Okay, so some of you that are working with us in year one, you're already doing that. You've been asked to portray yourself in a portrait of yourself, and the results are very diverse. From people using electrical wires to timber to fabric to string to leaves and all that. That's because all of us were different. We got different interests in different things. I thought that perhaps today I'll talk about just four of these preoccupations that I have, so that they perhaps can maybe guide you guys in how you can talk about your design, how you can start, how you can develop, and how you can end, so that it becomes part of your project submission. All these will be explained using examples from build projects. All the projects that you see here are local projects that you can visit when we are able to travel. So some of these things that you look at, right, it looks a little bit strange. The threshold, the roof, permeability, materiality, sufficiency, adaptive reuse, placemaking. They may or may not mean things to you, but they are things that they sort of guide us as a studio towards the kind of work we do. So maybe we talk about the first one, which is the threshold. Why is it important? It's a very strange thing to talk about, but again, I'm trying to then relate this to our culture, being Asian and being in the tropics. This is basically our culture, being in Asia. What we do is that when we enter a house, it's very normal for us to take off our shoes. So that's something that is local to us, it's unique to us. It's part of our culture. The raised doorstep in a Chinese building, that's also part of the culture. So one is physical, the raised doorstep. The other one is cultural, it's social. You don't see, you hear of it, you practice it. But we can use it to delineate between the inside and the outside. Okay, so this is one description of the threshold. Another one is when you take the threshold to a more macro level, when you talk about a building. When you have a house, for example, you look at the picture on the left. See how the door swings differently? Just by moderating the door swing, to swing it one way, the room on the right, if you look at it carefully, you see how the door swings in a conventional way. Most of our houses have door swings this way. It's easy to go in and out. But one of the things that it then reduces is that it reduces the threshold to just the door frame. So what does that mean? It means that also the privacy is compromised. If someone is asleep, once you open the door, you can see that person lying in bed. So that sort of compromises the privacy, which, if you look at the diagram on the left, the door swings away from the bed. So when you open, that person who is in bed might be maybe not dressed appropriately, maybe he's asleep. So that person gets a chance to be ready to meet whoever is coming into the room. So that's the kind of small little things that you can think about when you develop your scheme. This is on a micro level. On a more urban level, if you think about the 5-foot way, again, this is something that is very local to us, Asian countries, colonial countries especially. You see how this is actually part of the inside and outside. It's a shared space. It's not part of the shop. It's also not part of the street. It's that common space where a lot of interesting things happen, other than just for circulation. Yeah. So I use this building as an example of what a threshold could potentially do to a building. This is a building that is restored by us. It was built in 1963. It served as a municipal council for many years. Then in 2004, we were told to change it to a little museum on the first floor and to have shops on the ground floor. Those of you from Cebu, you'll be familiar with this project. So when we did it, we also did a diagram. This is like the kind of stuff that you guys in second year and third year do. You do a site forces diagram. You look at site forces. You see the red square there. That's where the building is. Yeah. Then you notice that they've got two important streets. One on the top, one at the bottom. So this building doesn't really have an entrance because all the development in the area has actually just taken away that sense of entry. It used to be from the north, where the multi-story car park is, but someone from the authorities decided to do this multi-story car park there. So that's taken away the sense of entry for that building. So we needed to create another one. So we asked the council, look, can we use the park as part of this entry space to create a forecourt? So essentially it's creating a threshold from the street to this threshold before they enter the building. So it's a preparatory space, it prepares you for visiting the museum. It also enables us to define the edge of that building by doing that. You see the red square that's around it now? So that basically defines the compound of this heritage center. So whether you're coming up from the top Wong Nai Cheong Road, or whether you're coming from Central Road, whether you're coming on foot, whether you're coming by car or by taxi, you enter the threshold first. The threshold is the green space, the park that we've taken over. It prepares you, it tells you that you're going to see something interesting. Then it tells you where to enter the building. Now, because this is a circular building, it makes it quite hard to tell people exactly where to come in. So when we presented this scheme to the mayor in Cebu, we told him we're going to design a big funnel that sucks people into the center of the building. I think when we were presenting, he thought we were speaking as a metaphor. He thought that maybe we're using some sort of maybe electrical device or something like that. He didn't think we were going to design something that is physically going to be a funnel, that sucks people in. But that's what we had in mind all the time. So this funnel was an intervention into the existing fabric of the building. We also put a water body around this circular building. What does this do? It basically allows us to control how people come in and out. Because there's water here, you cannot simply muscle wherever you want. You have to come through the park and then enter through the pool. So the water becomes a device to enrich the space. It's also a device for traffic flow. Okay? So we make these models. These models are done routinely by our studio. Some of you who are in year one, we talked about the idea of a sketch model. This is an example of a sketch model that real-life architects do. We do this, we take it apart and we change it. It's not very pretty, but it's to scale, and it's useful for us to just get a sense of space, sense of how things sit together. Okay, so when you look at this thing now, eventually you see how it gets built. See, so you can see the funnel transforming the look of the entire complex. Instead of a circular building that is sitting quite lonely in a park that's not related to it, now there is some symbiosis between how the building should be entered. So you get off, you walk through the park, and you enter this threshold. This threshold is this big funnel that we talked about that basically guides people into the... Now the threshold, the funnel that we designed is not simply just designing some funky thing to look cool. We picked up clues from Cebu as a town. Cebu, as you know, it's a shipping town. It's a riverine town. It's got a life around the river. It's also a town that built its base on timber logging. So we wanted to clad it in timber. We wanted to allude to like the jetties, when you like get out in and out of a boat, it's like a jetty. So the inside of the funnel, it is a little bit like the ramp that you use to get in and out of the ferry. Yeah, rough timber planks that makes you enter through the space. You enter, then it sort of prepares you. You come in. So from you see, the other thing about the threshold too is that you can see from this photo that you're getting out of the heat. Yeah, you get out of the heat before you enter into the aircon. There's this space where it allows you to cool, allows the sweat to dry off a little bit. Then it allows you to get ready. Then you come in some more. And then once you get through the funnel and enter into the building, it's sort of, you know that you are there inside the building. And this funnel is like a snake. It sort of insinuates himself. It becomes a floor. It's also part of an exhibition space. It allows you little glimpses into the courtyard. So you see how it sort of pushes itself like an animal inside. Then it pushes all the way. The funnel ends in the tip, right in the middle of the building. Then from there, you get out onto the upper floor. And this ramp is basically how you go up to the museum on the upper floor. So this is one example of a threshold. It's a bit elaborate, you know. It takes a little bit more time to design, a little bit more people to consult, a little bit more money to construct. But sometimes it's in a very simple form. Like for example, the entry into a house, which is also an office. You've got a door, you know. So most of us have this. You have a door. But when you enter the door, you know, usually we enter the door, then you know you muscle, and immediately you're in the house. So the inside and the outside is separated by this very small bit of brick wall and door, you know, 4 inches, about like that. Whereas if you enlarge the process of entering, you enlarge it, you stretch it a little bit, you enter, you see the water. The water is actually free because it's collected from the roof. Then you have a bit of green, and then you enter the building, you know. That sort of prepares you, it gets you ready. You can see a little bit, gives you a clue as to what you are expecting inside. Then you enter through the door. Then once you've entered, you know you've arrived because you are now inside. Yeah, whether there's aircon on or not, at least there is that process of entering. It's not just a matter of like going to the bank, you know, you open the glass door, it's only it's only half an inch thick. You open the door, one second you're outside, next second you're inside. The process of entering is not poetic, you know, neither is it very, very healthy. Yeah. This is another example of how you can basically take the threshold and basically use it to redefine borders. If you look at the old house, you used to have a road that drives all the way to the house. You see where the car is. So you masuk pintu besar, you go inside the door, and then that's inside outside. But in the renovation, what we convince the client to do is actually move the car out close to the fence. You park your car next to the fence, and then you return the garden back to the house. You take out the driveway, you plant back the grass. Then that journey, that threshold is between where you get out of the car, walk through the garden, and enter into the front door. So that threshold becomes the garden. The garden is a threshold. And that's the important thing that we want to stress in these 2 examples about the process of entering a space. So a tip to students is that the next time you go to a building, whether it's a museum here or a museum overseas or an art gallery or a school or a library, think about the threshold. Think about whether that building has a threshold that prepares you for what you are about to do inside the building. Okay? The next thing we're going to talk about is shade. Okay, as you know, in the tropics, we've got hot sun and we've got heavy rain. And we study this in building technology, we study this in studio. But how many of you do that? How many of you protect your buildings from the sun and the rain? These are very simple examples, ones that we are familiar with. One's in the jungle, you know, our colleagues in the jungle, they know the importance of shade, and they know the importance of creating shade from existing resources. And then the other example is the waka, you know. Essentially, it's just a roof supported by tiang. And it's usually the most frequently used structure within a compound, such as kampong or village, or even in a school. Yeah. So it becomes a place for congregation. For a house, why is it important? It's important because not only do you need to shade the windows, you also need to shade the building because it's one way of protecting the surfaces, the external surface of a house from our weather. So I'm going to use an example of a very simple. It's a house for a Malay family, and it's in Kuching. Okay, maybe some of you know this house, but these are the sketches that we did as we were talking to the client. We call these talking drawings. Essentially, we are sketching this as we're talking to them, and then we refine it, and we send it to and fro. We send it to them. They make some comments. As you can see, it's a very simple house. It's got the kids on one wing. It's got the parents on the other wing. It's organized around an L shape. The reason for the L shape is because there's an existing tree on the side, which we refused to cut. And we decided to retain the tree. In fact, the clients wanted to cut the tree. We were the ones saying, don't cut it, leave it. So we had an agreement with the couple to say, look, we leave it until you're on the first floor. Then you go and have a look at it and see whether you're comfortable with it or not. So they looked at it, they went up there, they had a discussion. I left them alone, they talked about it. And then they sort of decided that, yeah, okay, we can live with it. It's not too close to the house. They were worried about insects and all that getting into the house. But as you can see, there is no such issue. Okay. But the focus today is about shade. Okay, it's not about the house. So let me just talk about shade. You see this little sketch that we did, right? It's actually part of the west wall. This building, the front of the building faces west, and as you know, west sun it comes down very low and it's very hot, and it usually comes down. It comes down at the end of the day when the house is already collecting so much heat. So we thought that we will actually pull the roof down like a cap, like a baseball cap, pull it down along the west side, so that in doing so, the master bedroom on the upper floor, they can have nicer windows. They can look out in the morning when it's not hot. But in the afternoon, the roof protects the window from the heat. And then again, you see this, again, we talked about threshold. This is another threshold where, entering the house, you go through this little water feature that is it's a bonus. I'm just collecting water from the rain, from the roof. This comes down and collects here. It doesn't cost a lot of money to construct because, houses usually have ground beams around it anyway. I'm just lowering the slab so that it collects water instead of being an apron which doesn't collect water. Okay, so you see the entry there. So in this little photograph, you see an example of two design preoccupations already. One is about shade. The other one was about the notion of the threshold, about preparatory space before you enter a house. And shade is important, on this one is shading against the west sun. This one is what we call the Kanduri Terrace. It's an extension of the living room where on Fridays, members of the local surau, they come over and share lunch, so that space becomes a dining space for that short period of time. Okay. So these are just very simple examples of how, as students, as year 2, year 3 students, when you're designing structures, the pitch roof is not to be frowned upon. The pitch roof over the flat roof any day, because pitch roofs have got two qualities that a flat roof cannot provide. One is that it provides overhang. A pitch roof provides overhang on both sides of your building. It shades the wall. And when it shades the wall, it protects it against deterioration. And then it also protects it against heat collection during the day. That's the first advantage. The second one is that if you look at this photograph, you see I use the ceiling to follow the pitch of the roof. So that means that then the spaces inside are tall. They've got a tall space. If you look at the corridor space just now, I go back a few slides. You see how the sloping ceiling continues? So your ceilings are never flat. It follows the pitch of the roof. So tall rooms means that it's cooling, more cooling. The hot air has a chance to rise, so that when you're sitting down on a chair on the floor, it's not so hot. Whereas if it's a flat ceiling, you don't have that opportunity. Okay. The second one is it's not a house. It's a side office. In this one you can't visit. You need to travel to visit this one. This one is in Johor. It's on the causeway. It overlooks Singapore. We were told to do it very quick construction period. This is potentially another subject that we can talk about, which is appropriate technology, about building something that is temporary. It's a temporary building. So that's why we built it in steel, so that it's fast, so that it can be taken apart and taken away after the end of the project. But it's quite a big side office. And we wanted it to look towards the causeway because you can see Singapore beyond. It's quite a nice view. It sits on top of a hill. So we designed a very simple structure that is based on module, as you can see. If you look at the section below, you see everything is a module. It's basically a little square, which is about, I think, 8 meters by a certain number. I can't remember. Then we put a big roof over it, very straightforward. Again, another sketch model. And these are sketch models. Again, they are not pretty, but they tell the story. They sort of enable us to explain the structure to the engineer. we did it without the roof, you see. So they look at it, they can understand like roughly how we're going to span it and things like that. We thought the roof should do more than just protect. We thought that maybe you can walk on the roof because it's a lookout. Then you can walk on the roof and you can walk up to the top of the roof. And you can stand there and you can look at Johor on your right, then you can look at Singapore on your left. I thought it's kind of cool. So we proposed that to the client, and that's the construction. This is a little report that we prepared for a publication, but I thought that it shows a lot of the construction photographs that might be useful for those of you who are doing building construction and building technology. If you look closely, you will see that all the joints, all the steel joints are bolted, not welded. This is to enable the structure to be taken apart. So you don't have to cut, you just have to unbolt. Yeah? It makes it a bit harder at the beginning, but it basically is another form of sustainability. It means you can reuse. Yeah? Okay, and the floor plans are very simple. It's this notion of served and servant spaces, hardworking spaces and spaces that are being served. Okay, I'll keep going. Again, the blue areas are the served spaces where people use to work. It's got air conditioning and all that. Then the servant spaces are the spaces that are service spaces, staircases, toilet. Those are not air conditioned. And they're separated by this street. You see the photograph on the right with the wall that is like almost translucent. That wall is actually part of the roof that we turn down. So it's the same type of steel roofing that we take to protect you from the rain and the sun. Then we turn it down and it becomes then a screen. And what does that screen do? That screen actually, it's the same steel roofing, but it's got holes punched in it. So it allows the wind to get through and to breathe. So when you're going outside of the building, it becomes again another threshold, So that two things are starting to work together, the idea of the shade and threshold. Yeah. So I chose this slide because I thought maybe year 3, year 2 students, exploded axonometrics are underrated. You guys should use it more often to explain your scheme. It's a very good way of summarizing your idea. Okay. So when it's finished, it looks like that. Way beyond in that little green part there, that's Singapore. And we are looking at it from Johor. Right. Okay. I want to talk about permeability. Permeability is to do with cross ventilation. Okay, these are examples of permeability. Windows that open, structures that open and allow air to come through, furniture like this wall that allows air to come through. These are all examples of permeability. Sometimes permeability has to do with planning. It's got to do with this, like I'll show you this floor plan. It's got to do with just very permeable spaces, spaces that are very skinny, floor plans that are very skinny. You open this door, you open the window on the other side, and the wind can pass through. Okay, so again, the notion of shade, you can see from the big roof, the idea of the threshold, the entering the building, and walls that are permeable. These are glass louvers that you can open and shut. If it's raining, you shut it. If it's not raining, you open it. If it's really, really hot, you open it really, really big. It allows air to get through the house. And if you look at this next slide, you see how skinny the floor plan is. This is actually the width of a room, about 4.5 meters. It's got louvers on one side, and it's got the pool on the other side. So if the wind is blowing from the pool towards the house, you can imagine it brings a little bit of cool and moisture into the house. So it's cooling. So that's another way of being permeable. It doesn't have to have just lobang. Sometimes it's just skinny. You allow the house to breathe from left to right. So it makes it permeable. Yeah. This is a little project that we did again in Johor. I'll tell a little story. It's linked a little bit to something else that I'm fond of, which is adaptive reuse. Adaptive reuse means taking an old structure or building and finding new usage for it. Okay. So we were doing a slightly bigger project here, and they looked at the guardhouse and said, "Look, can you guys help us redo the guardhouse because the old one that looks a bit dated, looks a bit tired." So the brief was to actually take this whole thing down, pull it down, then do a new one. And because we are Sarawakians, we're sort of maybe a little bit more aware of, like, things are hard to come by, like, you know, it's not like simply you want to push it over, you push it over and do a new one. It takes more money. And also someone in the past 20 years ago, someone spent time and drew this up, designed it, an engineer designed the structure, M&E guys put in the lighting. Someone invested time and effort. So we thought it was a bit rude to just simply push it over. So we said, can we keep the structure? We keep the structure and then we see whether we can use the structure to re-devise the function of this guardhouse. So that's what we did. We kept all the concrete structures and then we basically clad it with this layer of brick that is not your normal brick wall. We call it brick lace because it's not rapat, you know. Actually, it's pulled apart. It's pulled apart so that air passes through it. And then behind, in some of the rooms, we've got another layer of glass so that you can then protect the room when it rains, if you need to. But otherwise, the rest of the building is where it needs to be open, it's open. Where it needs to be closed, it's closed. Where it needs to breathe, it breathes. So again, what that means is that it means that you reduce your air conditioning cost. Yeah. Again, these are construction photographs. I wanted to highlight one thing. You see this big steel box there? That is for the window opening. You guys who did building structures, you would know that on top of an opening, you always need to have a lintel. Yeah? You don't see a lintel here, you see? That's because if you look at this steel frame, you see the fins there? Those fins act like mini columns to support the lintel, which is just this very flat piece of steel. So it basically props it up along the way and enables that steel box to carry those layers of brickwork above. So it's just a little bit of detailing here. And that's the final outcome. The existing structure was retained, the roof and all that was taken away, and then we gave it a bit of new life, which is something that we are quite proud of, you know, to basically spend less, use less, to do more. Yeah. And then sometimes it's a bit low tech, you know, you just have walls that open and shut. If it rains, you shut it. This is in a masjid. Then if it is hot, you want the breeze to come through, the rain is fast, you open it, and then you can breathe. So all quite straightforward. Doesn't have to be motorized. It's just, you know, you just get some guy to open it now. Okay, this is the last chapter. This one is something that is I'm particularly fond of, you know, like building things and putting things together. I want to finish here quite quickly because we are linking you guys later on to a house. I've got someone on standby with a camera. We're going to visit a house that we just recently completed. So maybe we can see whether there are lessons from here that we've been talking about that was demonstrated and built in that house. Yeah? This is a definition of materiality. Essentially, it is about using materials in their original form, you know, to show them off in its original form, not to have wood pretend to be steel or not to have steel pretend to be something else, to use it in its natural form. Okay. Example, this building you guys probably know, those of you from Kuching, you know that this is the gym building along Rock Road. What I wanted to show here is just a simple thing that we did with the external plastering. Instead of using groove lines to break up that big space, we actually did it in such a way that the plastering is like shiplap. It's a little bit like weatherboards in an old house. And what that does is that it actually takes the water away from the surface of the building. Roof lines will collect water. This one will actually drive the water away, so it doesn't go moldy. And then where we need to have ventilation, like the staircases and the toilets, we pick a material that is able to breathe. You know, these vent blocks, they're designed to breathe. They're called breeze blocks in America because they allow the breeze to come through. And we use it for areas where you don't have windows, toilets, staircases, where it requires natural ventilation. Okay, so that's one idea about how you use very simple materials. You know, this whole building was built using steel, glass, aluminium, and cement. Okay, now I talked about some of these design preoccupations. It has to do with us as a person. You know, about us growing up. What did you go through? What did you go through when you were growing up? You know, if you grew up in the kampong, I think your preoccupations would be very different from if you grew up in a condominium, 22 stories up in the air. This is my childhood. You know, we grew up in an old house where um, family members are constantly making furniture out of recycled timber. So that's something that we sort of cultivate in our children. When they wanted a bed, instead of buying one, we join two doors together and we put wheels on it. So then it becomes a bed. Until she can afford to buy her own bed, this is her bed now. You know, so that's the kind of sort of attitude we try to cultivate in the interns in our office as well. So whenever we get a chance, we get them to work with our friends, work with our clients to build things with our own hands. We design, we also build. So this one is very simple. It's just basically putting in a timber floor. Some of you have done it before. Some of you have never seen this before. And that's why working in a group is good, because one person learns from the other. They don't learn from me. They actually learn through me. You know, I put these people together and they learn off each other. So the lesson here is this, you know, how do you span such a big space using just the same profile of timber? It's just basically a board this wide, about this big. So how do you span it? So essentially what we did was that if you look at the last slide now, is actually to do this, to actually combine the floorboards with the one standing up, one on top. So every small piece of floor becomes a little beam. Then you join all the beams together. Then it becomes the bench. So if you look underneath this bench, you see that it's got a small little beam, because things are stronger when you know, it takes more weight when you stand it upright like that, rather than like this. So you combine the two, one is for sitting on, one is for the support. So very simple lesson. This is another simple lesson. The lesson here is about mobility. This is a rural site. It's an old folks' home. They wanted a shed to plant orchids. We knew that we couldn't do welding up there because we didn't know how to do welding. So we got everything prefabricated, assembled together with nuts and bolts. These are all students over 2 Saturdays. And then when it's all put up, you just brace it together with the cross members, and then it stands up, and then you plant orchids underneath. Some of our clients are adventurous enough to involve us to do small little extensions in their house. And they know that we are using students. We have students to do the drawings, to do the explorations, to do the testing. So much so that the contractors also have that kind of spirit. They would do prototyping with us. So if you look at this photograph, essentially, we came up with a drawing of these steps. And we wanted the client to feel safe using it. In our year 1 class, we're talking about prototyping of the seats that they are designing, right? We also do prototyping. So the contractor did one out of plywood. You see Yasmin here trying it out, right? To see whether the steps are too high, whether they're high enough. Are they a bit scary coming down? Do I need 2 handrails on each side? That's all part of prototyping. So we do it out of a cheap material before we do it out of the expensive material, such as steel. And this becomes not just a project for us. It becomes a vehicle for students to learn about simple things about how you need to conceal services in the walls, how you need to weld things together. If you look at the bottom photograph, you learn about ergonomics. You learn about simple things about how you need to sort of chamfer that edge so that when you come down the stairs, when you go around, you don't have a tendency to scrape your chin, So it's just small little details that sort of teaches us as a group of people about how to sort of improve our skill. So sometimes we run out of projects to do. So I thought of doing this illegal structure in my garden. At that time, we had a student staying with us. So every morning, she would climb onto the roof of my house and take these progress photographs. So she works with another young lady who was also in the office at that time. And the beauty of it was that the man in white here, you see here standing with his hands on his hips. he's the father of that student. So the daughter designed the building with me, and the father built it with her. So that's kind of, I thought that's kind of nice, lah. So it's a very, very simple structure. I wanted to demonstrate the qualities of brick, very simple material, about how I can use brick as an enclosure, how I can also use brick as structure. So you see the tiangs, they are actually done using brick. On one side is brick, on the other side it is steel, just to balance. So that if students visit, they understand that you can use two materials concurrently, like a hybrid, to support a very simple structure. And again, this is all nut and bolt, so you can take it apart if you want to. This kind of construction makes you think a bit harder about the joints, because you have to plan everything a bit more carefully. Yeah. And the final result is like that. See, again, about permeability. You see about how the louvers, they keep the rain out if it rains, but if there's no rain, then you just have it open, the breeze moves through the space. Parts of it we built ourselves. So this is like the kitchen, we use recycled windows to build this little kitchen that has an oven on it, and we cook. And it can take a lot of people. It can take, like, during birthdays and all, it can take a lot of people. During MCO, it became my office. So as you can see, it's actually a very simple structure, but it's got lots to say. If you visit, then there's a lot of things that you can look at and sort of try to understand. Okay, now I'm going to stop sharing now, because we are going to go to site. Okay, so wait, let me see, I can escape. Now, while we are waiting for people to, how do I get out of this? Let me show. Okay. Stop sharing. Okay. All right. Now, another 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to bring you guys to a site. Now, I've got Sean here already on site. Sean, can you hear me? Okay, yes. You can hear me. Okay, good. Guys, can you do this, right? Can you make Sean your, how do I do it? Can you see Sean on the screen?
Yes, yes.
I guess you double click him and then he will appear big on your screen, right? Is that how it works on your phone? If you are using your PC, right, you pick him as, you go to layout and you make him your focus. Right, Sean Wee, you make him your focus. Does that make sense? If everyone's ready, right, then I thought maybe I'll just walk you through this house and we can simultaneously talk about thresholds. We can talk about permeability. We can talk about shade, definitely. Sean, can I get you to go in front and stand underneath the durian tree? Huh?
Hold on, Min. Sorry.
Yeah.
For those, I think you have to instead of layout, okay, go to the layout and then you have to go to focus. But at the moment, I'm looking at Min's.
You're looking at me again.
Yeah, just next to Minwee's name, there is a lock, right? So you have to click on that and then search for a name and then search for Sean. So if you select Sean, then you'll be looking at Sean's camera then. Okay, students? All right.
But if I continue talking, does it go back to me or is it still?
No, I still see Sean's camera.
Okay, the idea is to see the house and not to see me, okay? Please.
Yes, so you still can keep talking while Sean's walking around, yeah.
Okay, so Sean, I want to see the whole profile of the house to show the students about how, you see in this house, right, you see how hey, go in the sun, don't be so, Sean, go and stand at the gate. I want to show them how the roof falls down on the side. You see how we are talking about roofs just now, right? Shade, huh? You see how the roof of the house sort of folds down and becomes part of the wall on the other side. Yeah. You are now. You should rotate your phone, John. Okay, do that. Okay. Walk in, and then you see. So again, we are talking about thresholds. Huh? Come in. You go through this little link where we always try to collect water lah. So all the water from the roof, it gets collected through these rainwater down pipes that we expose. We don't try to hide it. It's collected in these two bodies of water on the side. Later on, we'll show you some more. There, you see, all the rainwater is collected here. It's just our way of just collecting the water here. Then from here it overflows into the drain if it becomes too deep lah. Otherwise, it becomes another device to retain a valuable resource which is water, you know. Okay, so then you come in and then you enter the house. So from the car, right, you've already gone through this little garden, yeah, and then you come into the house. Okay, now later on when we go upstairs, I'll talk to you about another idea of the threshold. So this is essentially what you see, in the main house. So if you look up, right, you will see how we've always tried to maintain the ceiling the same profile as the roof. Okay, so if you look up here, you see how just now when you were outside there, you saw how the roof sort of steps, huh? So there's a gap there, you know. If you can see my cursor at the end of those origami folds, there's a gap there. That gap is to allow hot air to escape. So just now, if you remember, the two roofs they are sort of stacked like that. Is to allow permeability. It's another way of permeability to allow the building to breathe. Yeah. And what you can see now is that you can see him crossing a threshold and going into his bedroom. So even for the bedrooms, there's this sense of a threshold, you know, where I'm in the family space, I'm crossing the bridge, I'm entering my personal space. Okay, so now let's walk down towards the dining area. Maybe let's enter the living room, Sean. Let's enter the living room. Okay, and you can see it's again one of those things about permeability, very, very skinny floor plans. When we handed over the house, right, it's actually got a lot less stuff in it now. It was designed for 4 brothers, but I think since then they have grown a little bit. The family has grown and they've got a lot more stuff in the house now. So if you go to the dining room and you look out, you will see the pool on the one side and the doors open, obviously. But then if you look away from the pool, you will also see that the part of the wall where the dining room is, it opens as well. So when privacy isn't a requirement, I can open those, and then the breeze really runs through, you know, from the pool through where you're eating your dinner or lunch, through to the other side, and it goes up the other side. Okay? So let's keep going along the Ruai. Hey, I need you to go upstairs actually, Sean. Okay, so you go upstairs. And then maybe when we go upstairs, you show them the family room. And then we talk about the threshold again, you know, from the family room and how you enter each of the 4 bedrooms. Okay. This house was done very quickly. There were, I think we finished this house in a year because when we got the commission for the house, the target was to coincide with one of the son's weddings. Some of you have seen this house in my slides a few weeks ago. So this is the real thing lah. So if you go and stand in front of one of the bridges, right, you get the idea about how bedrooms, right, they have their threshold, you know, the sense of entry, the bridge link between public and private spaces. Okay. I think let's end by going to the Ruai and going outside and just looking back, and then I think we can finish. Right. Are there any questions at the moment while we are doing this? Are there any questions from you guys that you want to interrupt me? We can talk about that. You can type your questions in the chat as well, and I can answer. We typically don't discuss the cost of houses, but houses in Kuching, right? Houses of this type, they're about $35 per square foot, or about 3,500 ringgit per meter square. Okay. We can enter one of the bedrooms there. Okay, so let's go inside and look out. Again, within the bedrooms, right, we follow the roof pitch now. It's just to essentially give you a heightened sense of space, you know. So you got wherever you got ceiling space that I can allow use for storage for mezzanine and things like that. We allow for that to happen. Okay. The origami ceiling is just gypsum board. It's not an expensive thing. It's just gypsum board. It just means more drawings from us to do the setting up. But then they do a prototype. Again, you know, the prototyping is important. They do a few. We go and have a look at it and say, yeah, that looks about right. And then they continue, and then they do the rest of the ceiling. And if you notice the origami, right, you notice that it's not only in the ceiling, it comes down as well, like in the roof. The roof comes down, becomes part of the wall. Same thing for the origami ceiling. It comes down, it becomes part of the wall. So it's a very cheap material, you know. For that young man who's Hanmis, who's interested in cost of construction, that's about 5 ringgit per square foot, including painting. So it's it's quite an it's not an inexpensive type of material. A piece of floor tile that you have in your house will be about 7 ringgit per square foot. Okay, so let's go downstairs and maybe we walk outside and then we can finish. One of the things that we sort of like to do too is that we like to have spaces that are double height. I think in the tropics, it's important to have some spaces double the height so that it allows the hot air to not be trapped, so that it can actually escape, you know. And then walls and doors and all that stuff, if you can have them open, then they should open. So I don't know whether you guys remember, but in my talk, right, we talked about how this house actually is linked to an old house. So let's go along the Ruai towards the kitchen pavilion. So if you keep walking towards the end of the corridor and turn right, you go back to the old house where mom and dad is. Then there's a question: how do you prevent moss from growing, especially in the tropics, or do you leave it? You only have moss growing if you intend for moss to be part of your design. If you don't want it to have moss growing and all that stuff, you paint it lah. Actually, a lot of our paints now that you can get from shops, they are antifungal, so they stop moss from growing. It won't grow unless you want it to be part of your design outlook. Okay, so we're now outside. So if you turn left, Sean, and look at the house, you see the other end of the house in elevation, like that. You see how the roof. You see the roof form. Basically, the same roof form just continue. It's like that. It just continue all the way through. The section is almost the same all the way throughout. That little gap there is to allow hot air to escape. Yeah. Okay. So then, again, you see there's a little pond there on the other side. That's again collecting rainwater from the big roof. Next, where the ducks are. Yeah. So let's go to the dining room, look back, and then I think we end our tour. There. Okay. Is there a time limit? Do we end now? It's 12 o'clock already, so I'm happy to stop here.
Yeah, you can go ahead or...
It's another 2 minutes. Sean, go into the dining room and then let's look back and then we will take questions if there are any. Just also a little bit of an interesting part about this house. After we finished the house, the additions kept coming. There were additional, this dining pavilion was built maybe a year after the house was completed. And then after this dining pavilion was completed, there was a request for a nursery to be built as an extension. Just now, Sean was showing you that black steel structure that's on top of the ruai. That black steel structure is the nursery. So the kids, the new granddaughter, she has a room there. So yeah, so it's just one of those things that sort of continue going. Is the gap underneath the roof totally open or without louvers? Okay, it's got louvers, but the louvers are fixed. It's the old-fashioned type of louvers where you got a piece of glass in front of the other. Like in the old primary school toilet, they always have 2 pieces of glass like that. It's to allow the air to move. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the end of the tour. Unless there's anything else you guys want to look at, it's quite a big house. You want to go to the other side and look at the roof turning down the other side? Someone wants to see the kitchen. Sean, can you show them the lights in the kitchen, our IKEA lights in the kitchen, the pantry, not the main kitchen? Good question. Okay. Let's go there and have a look. Okay. Let's see. Any other questions? We've lost the video. Okay, no, okay. The kitchen is very simple. The kitchen. Stefan wants to look at the toilet. Shut up, Stefan. This is the kitchen. It's very simple. Like this is the kind of kitchen for 4 young men. Okay, they don't cook a lot. They go back to the old house to eat. So when they have to heat up stuff, when they have to make drinks and all that stuff, it's like that. So as a result, we've designed it in it's quite youthful, quite young. The lighting is not very serious. Basically we bought a whole lot of table lamps and fixed them onto the lintel and made it into the lighting, so they can turn on lights on and off as they please. It sort of adds to this sort of quite free-spirited nature of the house. So if you go up to the backyard now and you look at the roof, right, you'll see how the roof, actually the same material gets turned down. Okay. Ashraf. Oh. Okay, Ashraf, what's the trickiest part of the design? Actually, the trickiest part is trying to give them the additional value that they didn't ask for. Like they didn't ask for the origami ceilings. They didn't ask for many of the windows that open and shut. This tall space. The clients sort of leave it up to you. So it's up to you to make it as easy or as complicated as you want it to be. But with houses, the difficulty is this: you're designing their personal space, with their personal money. So if you listen carefully and take instructions well and provide innovative ideas at the right time, it's not difficult. That's why we stay on good terms with our clients. That's why we're able to come in to visit. Even 2-3 years after we completed the house, we're continuing to work with them. So the relationship is good. I don't think we need to look at the toilets anymore, Sean. I think Stefan has seen enough of the toilets. we can go outside and look at the big steel roof turning down. I think the whole lot. Can you open it? You can't. And then the other thing that I always talk about, when we hand over the house, you sort of hand it over with a notion of how you expect the house to be used. Yeah. But because there are many family members and they've got wives and they've got kids, and then it sort of changes the the dynamics of the house. So sometimes you see, you see the house sort of evolving with it. If you design it right, then it sort of is able to cater for the changes as the family grows. So I think this one they've sort of taken over and they've made it their own. So this is the same roof material. So if you climb onto the roof, you'll see this. But we've turned it down and then it becomes part of the wall. If you look carefully, there is actually a gap between this the underside of the roof and the floor upstairs. So again, the air does move up. See this? See? And the lobang. So on the family area, there is breeze coming up from down here. Allows the space to move a little bit more. That is a material called Unisim. Okay, I'll just type it in. It's called Unisim. It's a standard. No, it's not standing seam. Standing seams are expensive. It's called Unisim. Wait, see whether I can type Unisim. Unisim 360. Okay, but it's similar to standing seam. Yes, it's similar. So when we did the nursery, we used the same stuff, and we have to use steel because it has to be light. It has to be. We have to be able to get up there and do it. So this was done, I think, about 2 years after that movie. Okay.
Okay, Architect Min, I think due to the interest of time, we can only afford to take one more final question while you're doing the touring.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, all right. So is there one final question before we end the session?
I think there's one question. Sorry, I think there's one question. Is that double wall, Min?
Double wall?
Yeah. The standing seam just now, the uni seam.
Yeah.
What's inside it? Is it maybe the question is?
It's actually no, it's not. It's a roof structure. It's basically a steel structure.
I see.
So, Sean, can you just go below a bit further below? You see the white part, right? Is actually RC lah. It's a normal structure that supports the floor above. And then it's basically the same roof material. Your rafters and battens, and it turns down and it comes down, continues the same way. The construction is the same thing. There's no double wall. There's no brick wall on the upper floor. It's just the roof, together with the origami ceiling on the inside, or the origami wall. Okay.
Right. Interesting.
Okay, so if there's nothing else, then I guess that's the end of the sharing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you very much, Sean and Architect Min, for spending the time to share to us the works. I'm sure there are a lot of more interesting works from Architect Min himself. I think we are already past 12, and then we should be ending this session. Would like to thank you again for your time. Before we end this, I would like to ask one final question, Architect Min. What is your method to make sure that your building would respond well to the tropic climate? I mean, I'm sure that you have done a lot of so-called research, to achieve certain some comfort level for your building. Is it a technical process, or is it just based on your wisdom or anything?
Wisdom. It's actually more. It's based on. I think in many cases it's based on just physically doing it lah. The small projects at the end of the slideshow just now. All these small little ones, right? Especially ones that are quick and fast. We use it to test ideas. The pavilion, for example, that is a project where we use to test whether steel structures, whether that particular size can be used for columns, whether the brick lays, whether they work. Smaller projects, I think the experimentation in the smaller projects, they inform us for the bigger ones. So it's not through any kind of rigorous research that you would typically do in a university, for example. It's more from doing it and then making mistakes And then also to an extent is to also, it has something to do with also talking to the builders. They've got years of experience, so normally we work in consultation with them as well. There's hardly any aircon, as you can see. I think the aircon is only in the room. And then I think in the living room, they've got a couple, which they turn on when there are a lot of people. Otherwise, they normally don't turn it on. It's quite breezy.
Yeah, we can see that. I mean, by just looking at it, I'm sure this is quite a breezy space inside.
But it also depends on the client, I mean, this particular client, they're very cool about all these things, they are sort of outdoors people. They walk around without their shoes on and all that. So they're quite sort of, that they're relaxed. They don't mind things that being a little bit like natural. Other clients might have problems with that, so you can't apply the same set of rules to everyone. Mr. and Mrs. Accountant in BDC will probably have problems with with this kind of approach. But Richard and Donna, they don't, because that's how they live their life.
So yeah. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Architect Min. So with that, since we have done subconsciously the Q&A session while you are doing the tour, I think we have just reached this at the end stage of this session. So thank you very much, Architect Min. So
maybe just one last suggestion is that two suggestions. I think one is that if you guys have any more questions, right, continue to post them in the studio. Actually, I've only got access with the Studio One cohort, right?
yes, yes.
Okay.
Do you require to have access to all?
No. I'm saying that if you do have questions about anything else, send them to me. I'm happy to answer them when I have time.
Okay.
That's the first thing. The second thing too is that the next time when we have sessions like this, right? When they log in, right? Can you guys mute the company? Because when I'm talking, right, I can hear people logging in to take attendance. Yeah, maybe that's something that you can turn off.
Sure. We will look into
Okay.
that. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Thank you everyone for being here with us. See you in the next Ed Plus. I believe Puan Donna has something arranged for you. That will be on the next week, I guess. Am I right, Puan Donna? Dr. Azalila will be talking about to be announced soon. Okay. With that, I would like to end this Ed Plus. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all.